If will is a property of person, then we would expect Christ to have only one will. But we know he doesn't have just one will. Garden, high priestly prayer, right? All of that language, I am submitting my will to the Father's will. There's more than one will here. If will is a property of nature, we would expect that Christ, who has two natures, to have who wills, and indeed he does. And Christ must have, as we have seen, two natures and two wills, because if Christ does not assume a human nature and a human will, he cannot heal it. Let's say will is a property of person, not a property of nature. Well, it is our human nature that needs to be redeemed, but we need our will redeemed, right? And a will can be redeemed because our will is a property of our nature. Again, Gregory of Nazianzus, that which is not assumed is not healed. Our will is corrupt, right? We say that as Calvinists. Our will is depraved. Our will needs to be redeemed. In order for Christ to redeem our will, he had to have a human will, which means that will is a property of nature and not person. If Christ did not assume a human will in his incarnation, it's difficult to argue that Jesus was genuinely human, because genuine humans have human wills. If Christ cannot, this is Wellham, I think he says this really well, if Christ cannot walk in obedience to the law in exact the same way that the first Adam failed, then he cannot stand in our place as our substitute and accomplish our justification. He has to have a human nature. So again, Christology is bound up in this. If Christ had to have a human nature in order for us to be redeemed, then a human will, in order for our will to be redeemed, then will has to be a property of nature. Christ has to have two wills. If will is a property of nature, then how many wills does God have? He can only have one. And if God can only have one will, and if submission is the ordering of one will under another, then there cannot be submission eternally. Cannot be submission in the Godhead until Jesus assumes a human will. Then, now, everybody agrees on this, the incarnate Christ submitted his will to the divine will. That does not happen until the incarnation. Of course, Romans chapter 5 is articulating exactly what Wellham just said. Adam failed because he allowed his will to be contrary to God's will, and persons act in accordance with their will, and so he acted in disobedience in response to, or as evidence of, the fact that he took his will in a different direction than God's command. In order for Christ to be the second Adam and stand in our place, Christ had to have a human will. If Christ had a human will, then he had two wills, both divine and human. And since Christ is one person with two natures, it is fitting to conclude that will is a faculty properly predicated of a nature and not a person.